I'm once again back to flying into LZs, mostly hot LZs in total enemy-controlled areas. A never-ending situation with the same results. American troops killed and wounded seemingly for no reason other than our troops are expendable in a war of attrition. A lot of concerned and scared faces on our troops as we fly to these LZs. This could be the end of my life, many of them think. And for many it is. No one wanted to fly into these areas. I never in my 8 solid months of flying into LZs saw a senior officer fly into these remote LZs, except for my AC Captain Schwartz, a very capable and brave fellow. Only enlisted guys and lieutenants and warrant officers should be killed. An unspoken rule in the Vietnam War. So many very frightened faces on my helicopter. No one laughs or is in good spirits on their way to these LZs. Usually no one even talks. Everyone wishes that they were somewhere else and doing something else than being here and doing this. Everyone is in their own thoughts. Some saying prayers and kissing holy medals, good luck pieces or crosses. I'm usually the only one that speaks. I, as crew chief, let the infantry know that as the helicopter hits the ground, 3 guys jump out of the helicopter on each side at once and hit the ground or crouch down, as I and my gunner will be constantly shooting into whatever is in front of our machine guns. One day we had about an 8 helicopter first insertion into an LZ that was way out in NVA-VC controlled territory, which was pretty much everywhere. I do not recall if we came in shooting or not, but we received no fire and no helicopters were hit, nor did we see any enemy troops, which actually meant nothing. We were getting way too lax on shooting up the LZs on first insertions. Most all of the flight wanted all guns firing coming into LZs, but orders from whoever prevented that safety measure. We landed about 50 infantry fellows into the LZ. We flew away as the infantry seemed to be taking no fire. In about 15 minutes of flying time, we lost contact with the troopers on the ground in the LZ we just left. That was unusual as the guys had 2 radios with them. My helicopter volunteered to go back and see what was happening. The flight was low on fuel and had to go to the POL, point of lubrication, to refuel before the next orders were given. My helicopter did a 180-degree turn and headed back to the LZ. We would need to be refueled by 55-gallon drums before we could reach a refueling point once we made our trip back to the LZ. As we approached the LZ, which was an open field with somewhat defoliated trees on all 4 sides, we could see a lot of bodies laying in the LZ. I at first thought that they may be NVA with their uniforms on, but as we flew closer, we could see that they were the infantry fellows that we had just dropped off in what seemed to be in a cold LZ. We flew in circles at a few hundred feet and could see no NVA or VC when some GIs came out of a tree line and started to wave to us. We radioed in that the infantry we lost contact with were mostly dead laying in the LZ and that we were going to land and hear what the survivors had to say. We had orders to stay in the air, I think, but landed anyway. We kept the RPMs up so that we could lift off quickly. Most of the survivors were wounded. I think this occurred on Thanksgiving 1968 or thereabout. The flight would be back with gunships and reinforcements in about an hour and 15 minutes. Until then, hang in there. Well, if the NVA came back in the waiting time, that would be it for us, as we were determined to die on the spot. We had 0 air support or artillery in range where we were at. It was a sad situation more than anything. 35 dead GIs killed right away and the wounded crawling into the tree line. So many killed so fast. I don't know why the NVA didn't come back to finish us off, but seeing our helicopter known to have radios of all sorts by the enemy could have urged caution on their part. Like a lot of times, the NVA-VC kill fast and then disappear before artillery or airstrikes hit. We saw some bunkers and shot through their slits. but it seemed all signs of the enemy disappeared, luckily for us. With the return of the helicopters with reinforcements, my helicopter was refueled with 55-gallon drums of JP-4. We loaded up with some wounded and flew away, as did some other helicopters. I never once recall ever having to take out dead GIs from any battle area. That was not our job. We were only concerned about the living, wounded or not. We went where the action was, always. We were a fighting assault helicopter company. There was a little Bears helicopter company and others in Puloy or Kuchi that did the resupply missions and hauled out the dead. We were strictly the shooting helicopters moving infantry around. Combat assaults were not easy on the nerves, and so they were in a category of their own designated assault helicopter company. When on helicopter assault missions, which were every day except for single ship missions, which at most were once a week, the crews would see fear on the faces of most of the infantry fellows. The others had serious, contemplative looks on their faces. Death could be minutes away, and was for some. So much different than the war movies show. Probably the most disliked actor of combat soldiers was John Wayne, who dodged the draft and refused to enlist during World War II while others were dying. His war movies tend to show glorification of combat, of which in real life there is none. War movies produced and directed by people who never saw combat, which I think were all war movies, are terribly deceiving to anyone watching them. One in real combat for 30 seconds understands there is no glory in killing or being killed, which is the definition of war. I have yet to see a truthful depiction of war. I, for one, was so tired of seeing fear in the faces of our teenage soldiers that it was difficult to look at. I used to try and cheer them up with a thumbs up on the helicopter and tell them to keep their heads down, as we will rip up both sides of the LZ with our machine guns. But all in all, the infantry fellows were considered expendable by the politicians and senior officers. That was what the war of attrition was all about.